The suitcase hit the dusty ground with a thud as Cordelia Brightwater watched the stagecoach disappear into the Arizona heat, leaving her stranded on the main street of Mesquite Falls. Her carefully pressed traveling dress clung to her dark skin, now damp with perspiration and humiliation. The letter in her trembling hand bore the cruel words that had shattered her hopes. Just moments before, "I cannot marry a woman of your ... complexion. Find your own way back east." Silas Whitmore hadn't even possessed the courage to face her himself, sending his cowardly rejection through the stagecoach driver like she was nothing more than unwanted cargo. "Miss, you all right there?" A weathered voice drew her attention to an elderly man sweeping the porch of the general store. His kind eyes filled with concern. "I'm quite well, thank you," Cordelia lied, her chin lifting with the dignity her grandmother had instilled in her. She'd survived the brutal journey from Charleston, escaped the suffocating expectations of her well-meaning but overprotective family, and invested every penny she'd saved from her seamstress work into this mail-order marriage arrangement. She would not crumble now. The shopkeeper, who introduced himself as Moses Hartwell, offered her water and a place to sit in the shade, as she sipped gratefully from the tin cup. Cordelia noticed the curious stares from other townspeople, some hostile, others merely surprised to see a woman of color in their remote settlement. "Whitmore's place is about 5 miles north," Moses said gently, clearly having overheard her conversation with the driver. "But if you're looking for work instead of other arrangements... The doc's wife just passed, and he's been struggling something fierce with his household." Cordelia's heart clenched. Work. She'd come here to be a wife, to build a life, to belong somewhere. But perhaps this was God's way of steering her toward something better than a man who couldn't see past her skin. "What's his name?" she asked. "Doc Aurelius Fleming. Good man, fair man, lost his patience to fever last month." Moses paused, studying her face. "You got skills beyond looking pretty, Miss Brightwater. Cordelia Brightwater. And yes, I can cook, clean, mend, and manage a household. I can also read and write, and I know herbs for healing." As if summoned by their conversation, a tall figure emerged from the building across the street marked Doctor. The man's hair was prematurely silver, his face lined with grief and exhaustion. He moved with the careful precision of someone carrying the weight of too many sorrows. Their eyes met across the dusty expanse, and Cordelia saw something flicker in his expression, but recognition of shared pain. Here was a man who understood loss, who might see her as more than the color of her skin. "Moses," Dr. Fleming called, approaching them slowly. "Who's our visitor?" Before Moses could answer, a commotion erupted at the far end of town. Shouts and the thunder of approaching horses filled the air as a group of Apache riders appeared on the ridge overlooking Mesquite Falls. The townspeople scattered like leaves before a storm, mothers grabbing children and men reaching for rifles. But Cordelia remained frozen in place, mesmerized by the sight of the riders silhouetted against the blazing sky. At their head sat a warrior whose presence commanded attention even from a distant stall, proud and utterly fearless. "Get inside," Dr. Fleming shouted, reaching for Cordelia's arm, but she stood her ground. "Are they hostile?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "They're Apache," Moses muttered, as if that answered everything. But as the riders approached, Cordelia noticed something others missed in their panic. The lead warrior rode with his weapon lowered, his posture suggesting negotiation rather than attack. When he was close enough for her to see his face clearly, their eyes locked across the chaos. Time seemed suspended. His features were sharp and noble, his long black hair decorated with feathers and small braids. But it was his eyes that captured her, dark, intelligent, and filled with a depth of understanding that made her breath catch. The warrior, who she would later learn was called Kestrel Hussors, spoke a few words in Apache to his companions before dismounting with fluid grace. He walked directly toward her, ignoring the nervous murmurs and the rifles trained in his direction. When he stopped just feet away, He studied her face with an intensity that should have frightened her, but instead felt like coming home. Then, in accented but clear English, he spoke the words that would change everything. "You are the woman whose spirit burns brighter than the desert sun. I have seen you in visions." The entire street fell silent. Even Dr. Fleming lowered his arm, transfixed by the unexpected exchange. "I beg your pardon," Cordelia whispered, though something deep in her soul recognized the truth in his words. Kestrel stepped closer, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. "3 moons ago, the spirits showed me a woman with skin like rich earth and eyes like mountain streams. They said she would come when the white man's world had no place for her, seeking something she could not name. They said she would be mine to protect, if she chose." Cordelia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, not physically, but spiritually, emotionally. This stranger spoke to parts of her that Silas Whitmore had never even acknowledged existed. "You're speaking nonsense," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Kestrel's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "You came here to marry a man who rejected you before he met you. You carry shame that is not yours to bear. And right now, you feel more seen by a stranger than you ever felt by those who claim to know you." The accuracy of his words stole her breath. Around them, the tension gradually eased as townspeople realized this was not a raid, but something far more complex. Dr. Fleming cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all step inside and discuss this civilly." But Kestrel never broke eye contact with Cordelia. Tea did not come to discuss. "I came because the spirits called me to find her, but the choice is hers alone." "Choice," Cordelia found her voice. "You're suggesting I should leave with you? I don't even know you. And did you know the man you came to marry?" The question hit like a physical blow. She hadn't, not really. Silas had been nothing more than letters on paper, promises made to a stranger. Yet here stood a man who claimed to have seen her in visions, who looked at her as if she were something precious rather than problematic. "This is madness," Dr. Fleming interjected gently, though his tone held more concern than judgment. "Miss Brightwater, you've had a difficult day. Perhaps you should rest before making any significant decisions." Cordelia appreciated his kindness, but her attention remained fixed on the Apache warrior, who stood before her like something from a dream. "You say the spirits showed you visions. What else did they reveal?" Kestrel's companions had dismounted as well, but kept respectful distance, their eyes alert but not threatening. "They showed me your hands, creating beautiful things, your voice bringing comfort to the sick, your heart yearning for a place where you could belong completely. They showed me how the white world would wound you with its blindness, and how healing would come from unexpected places." The specificity of his words sent chills down her spine. She was indeed skilled with her hands, not just sewing, but carving, painting, creating beauty wherever she went. And she had always felt called to help the suffering, even when her family insisted such impulses were beneath her social aspirations. "Visions can be interpreted many ways," she said carefully. "True, but some truths cannot be denied." Kestrel gestured toward Moses, who had been listening with growing fascination. "Ask this man what he sees when he looks at you." Moses shifted uncomfortably under the sudden attention. "I see a strong young woman with skills and grace, though I reckon the world don't always appreciate such gifts." "And you, medicine man?" Kestrel addressed Dr. Fleming directly. "What do your eyes tell you?" Dr. Fleming studied Cordelia with professional assessment. "I see someone with healing instincts, someone who could ease suffering if given the opportunity, someone who deserves better than she's received. Yet in your white settlements, she will always be judged first by her skin, then by her gender, and only last by her worth," Kestrel said quietly. "In my world, she would be valued for her spirit, her skills, her strength." Cordelia felt herself wavering. Everything this stranger said resonated with truths she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. But leaving with him would mean abandoning everything familiar, stepping into a world she knew nothing about. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "Come with me to our summer camp. Stay as our honored guest. Learn our ways. Let us learn yours. If after one full moon you wish to return to this world, I will escort you safely wherever you choose to go. If you decide to stay," his eyes held promises he didn't need to voice. "And if I choose neither, if I decide to make my own way here in Mesquite Falls, then I will respect your choice and ensure your safety from afar. But I will not leave until I know your decision." Dr. Fleming stepped forward. "Miss Brightwater, my offer of employment stands regardless of your other considerations. You could stay in town, work with me, establish yourself independently." The moment stretched taut as 3 different paths spread before her. Return east to a family who loved but constrained her. Remain in Mesquite Falls and carve out a new life among skeptical strangers. Or venture into the unknown with a man who claimed the spirits themselves had led him to her. As she pondered, a young Apache woman rode up and whispered urgently to Kestrel. His expression darkened, and he spoke rapidly in his native language before turning back to Cordelia. "There is more you should know. The man who rejected you, Whitmore, has been selling weapons to renegade bands, fueling conflicts between our peoples. Your arrival threatens to expose his activities because you would have seen his transactions. This is another reason the spirits guided me to find you." The revelation hit like cold water. "You're saying I'm in danger." "Not while I draw breath," Kestrel vowed, his hand moving instinctively to his weapons. "But yes, your presence here complicates his schemes. He expected you to leave quietly, in shame. Instead, you remain, and questions will be asked." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of approaching horses echoed through the settlement. Silas Whitmore himself appeared at the head of a group of rough-looking men, his face twisted with anger and something darker. Silas Whitmore rode into the square with the swagger of a man, accustomed to having his way, his pale eyes scanning the crowd until they fixed on Cordelia with unconcealed malice. Behind him, 6 hard-faced men sat their horses like wolves, waiting for blood, their hands never far from their weapons. Well, Silas drawled, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. "Looks like my former bride-to-be has made some interesting new friends." Kestrel moved almost imperceptibly, positioning himself between Cordelia and the newcomers. The subtle shift spoke volumes about his protective instincts, and Cordelia found herself oddly comforted by his presence. "Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Fleming said carefully, "there's no need for this kind of confrontation, isn't there?" Silas's laugh held no humor. "I've got a business to protect, and certain ... complications need to be addressed." Moses stepped forward, his weathered hands gripping his broom handle like a weapon. "Now see here, Whitmore. Miss Cordelia ain't done nothing to you but answer your own letters. You got no call to." "I got every call to protect my interests," Silas cut him off. His gaze shifted to Kestrel, and something ugly flickered in his expression, especially when savages start stirring up trouble in my territory. The insult hung in the air like a physical blow, but Kestrel's composure never wavered. "I am Kestrel Soares of the Chiricahua Apache. I have come in peace to speak with this woman. Your quarrel is not with me." "My quarrel is with anyone who threatens my business," Silas snarled. "And right now, that includes both of you." Cordelia felt a surge of rage that surprised her with its intensity. "How dare you? You rejected me without even meeting me, left me stranded in a strange place, and now you return to threaten me. What kind of man are you?" "The kind who doesn't let problems walk away," Silas replied coldly. "You've seen too much, heard too much. Can't have you spreading stories about my ... operations." The admission sent chills through the gathered crowd. Even his own men shifted uncomfortably at their boss's brazen words. Dr. Fleming straightened to his full height. "Whitmore, you're confessing to criminal activity in front of witnesses? Set you reconsider your words." I'm confessing to protecting my livelihood, Silas corrected. And if certain people can't appreciate the value of silence, he let the threat hang unfinished. That was when Kestrel spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I know of your weapons sales to the renegades. My people have traced stolen rifles back to your ranch. You profit from the blood of both our peoples. Silas's face went white, then flushed deep red. You can't prove anything, can't I? Kestrel reached into his shirt and withdrew a brass plate stamped with distinctive markings. This came from a rifle used to attack our village last month. 3 children died. The markings identify it as part of a shipment reported stolen from the territorial militia shipment that somehow found its way to your property. The evidence was damning, and everyone present knew it. Silas's hands twitched toward his gun, but he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Even if that were true, he said through gritted teeth, it doesn't change the fact that she's a complication I can't afford. Cordelia had heard enough. Stepping forward, she drew herself to her full height and spoke with all the dignity her grandmother had taught her. Mr. Whitmore, you are a coward and a criminal. You profit from death and misery, then dare to threaten an innocent woman to protect your evil schemes. I want nothing to do with you or your blood money. You don't get to choose, Silas growled, his hand moving to his gun. But Kestrel was faster. In one fluid motion, he had his tomahawk in hand, its blade gleaming in the afternoon sun. Around the square, his companions had similarly prepared for battle, their movements coordinated and deadly. The woman is under my protection, Kestrel said quietly. Touch her, and you answer to me. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Cordelia could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on all of them. Whatever happened next would change everything. Then Moses stepped forward, his old shotgun cradled in his arms. And mine, he said simply. Dr. Fleming moved to join them. And mine. One by one, other townspeople emerged from their hiding places, forming a protective circle around Cordelia. Whatever their feelings about her race, they would not stand by and watch Silas Whitmore terrorize an innocent woman. The circle of protection around Cordelia swelled as more townspeople emerged from doorways and alleyways, their faces set with determination. Mrs. Henrietta Blackstone, the stern-faced schoolmarm, appeared with a rifle nearly as tall as herself. Young Timothy Fletcher, barely 16, stood beside his father with shaking hands but unwavering resolve. Even the saloon girls had gathered, their painted faces fierce with solidarity. Silas surveyed the crowd with growing alarm. This wasn't how he'd expected things to unfold. You're all making a terrible mistake, he warned. But his voice had lost its earlier confidence. I have connections in the territorial government. Cross me, and you'll regret it. The only one who'll have regrets is you, Dr. Fleming replied steadily. Moses, ride to Fort Whitman. Tell Colonel Morrison what we've learned about the weapons. No need, a new voice called from the edge of town. A contingent of blue-uniformed cavalry soldiers rode into view, led by a weathered captain whose insignia marked him as regular army. Behind them came a familiar figure, the stagecoach driver who had brought Cordelia to town, his face grim with purpose. Captain Nathaniel Ironwood, Territorial Investigation Division, the officer announced as he dismounted. We've been tracking illegal weapons sales for months. Thanks to information provided by your driver here, we've finally traced them to their source. The driver, a grizzled man named Pike, spat in the dust. Couldn't stand by and watch decent folks get hurt by this snake's schemes. Miss Cordelia deserved better than being caught up in his mess. Silas's men began backing their horses away, recognizing the shift in the situation. Their loyalty extended only as far as their paychecks, and capture by the Territorial Army meant prison at best, hanging at worst. You have no proof, Silas blustered, though sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cooling evening air. Captain Ironwood smiled coldly. We have testimony from 3 different Apache bands about weapons traced to your property. We have bills of sale with forged signatures. And now we have this." He gestured to the brass plate still in Kestrel's hand. "More importantly," Kestrel added, "we have witnesses to your threats against an innocent woman. Among my people, threatening the defenseless is the act of a coward." The Apache warrior's words carried weight beyond their meaning. Even Silas's remaining supporters could see the dishonor in his actions, the fundamental weakness of a man who would terrorize a woman to protect his crimes. As the soldiers moved to arrest Silas and his accomplices, Cordelia felt a profound sense of closure. The man who had rejected and threatened her was revealed for what he truly was, not just prejudiced, but actively evil. Her escape from marriage to him felt less like rejection and more like divine intervention. "Miss Brightwater," Captain Ironwood approached her respectfully. "I'll need a statement about the threats made against you today. But first, are you unharmed?" "Physically, yes," Cordelia replied. "Though I confess, this entire experience has been overwhelming." Kestrel stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "The immediate danger has passed. Now you can make your choice freely, without fear." The reminder of her decision brought everything rushing back. In all the excitement, she had almost forgotten the impossible choice before her 3 paths, each leading to an uncertain future. Dr. Fleming approached cautiously. "Miss Brightwater, my offer of employment remains open. After what happened today, I believe the town would welcome your presence. You've shown remarkable courage." Moses nodded agreement. "Folks here have seen your character now. You'd have a place among us if you wanted it." But even as the townspeople voiced their acceptance, Cordelia found her gaze drawn to Kestrel. Throughout the confrontation, he had stood ready to die for her safety without asking anything in return. His protection hadn't been conditional on her agreement to leave with him, it had simply been the right thing to do. "The offer of hospitality still stands," Kestrel said quietly. "Come to our camp, meet our people. See how you feel among those who judge by spirit rather than skin. If it doesn't suit you, you can return here, knowing you explored every possibility." As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Cordelia realized that her decision had been made not by logic, but by the calling of her heart. The spirits that had led Kestrel to her were the same ones that had guided her away from a disastrous marriage and toward this moment of true choice. "Dr. Fleming," she said slowly, "would you be willing to tend any medical needs that might arise at the Apache camp? I suspect your skills would be welcome there as much as mine might be here." The doctor's eyes lit with understanding. "Are you suggesting some sort of ... cultural exchange?" Kestrel smiled, the first time she had seen such open joy on his face. "Healing knows no boundaries. A medicine man who serves all people would be honored among us." The foundation for something unprecedented was taking shape, not just a romance between 2 people from different worlds, but a bridge between communities that had known only conflict. 3 weeks later, Cordelia sat beside a clear mountain stream, her hands working steadily as she ground medicinal herbs under the patient instruction of Ayanna, Kestrel's grandmother. The old woman's weathered face held wisdom accumulated over 7 decades, and her acceptance of Cordelia had been immediate and complete. The willow bark must be ground finer, Ayanna instructed in her careful English, supplemented by gestures and the few Apache words Cordelia was learning. Pain flees from smooth medicine faster than rough. Around them, the Apache camp bustled with the peaceful activity of daily life. Children played elaborate games that seemed to involve equal parts strategy and laughter. Women worked on intricate beadwork while discussing everything from weather patterns to the best techniques for preserving meat. Men maintained weapons and tools while debating hunting strategies and sharing news from other bands. What struck Cordelia most profoundly was how naturally she had been absorbed into this rhythm. No one stared at her skin color or whispered about her presence. Her skills were appreciated without reservation, her opinions sought without condescension. When she had successfully treated a child's fever using a combination of her grandmother's remedies and Apache techniques, she had been embraced as a healer rather than tolerated as an outsider. Dr. Fleming rode into camp daily, establishing a medical partnership that had already saved several lives. The integration hadn't been without challenges: language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and deep-seated mistrust from both sides. But good faith and mutual respect were proving stronger than prejudice. "Your hands learn quickly," Ayanna observed, approving Cordelia's herb preparation. "But your heart learned faster. My grandson saw truly in his visions." Kestrel approached from the horse corral, his movements fluid and confident. Over these weeks, Cordelia had come to appreciate the quiet strength he brought to every situation. The way he listened more than he spoke, how he protected without possessing. "The scouts report riders approaching," he announced. "Captain Ironwood and an escort, flying a peace flag." The news spread quickly through camp, bringing a mix of tension and curiosity. Official visits from the army were rare and usually brought either very good news or very bad news. As the soldiers rode into camp, Cordelia noticed the careful respect in their bearing. These weren't men preparing for conflict, but officials conducting legitimate business. Captain Ironwood dismounted and approached the gathered tribal elders with appropriate ceremony. "Chief Standing Bear, I bring news from the territorial capital." The elderly chief, whose presence commanded automatic respect, gestured for the captain to continue. "Silas Whitmore has been convicted of weapons smuggling and conspiracy to incite violence. He'll spend the next 20 years in territorial prison. More importantly, his testimony has led to the arrest of a network of illegal traders throughout the territory." A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the gathered Apache. Justice had been served, and the threat of contaminated weapons sales would be significantly reduced. "There's more," Captain Ironwood continued. "The territorial governor has authorized me to establish a formal peace treaty with your band, including trade agreements and mutual defense provisions. The events here in Mesquite Falls have convinced authorities that cooperation serves everyone's interests better than conflict." Chief Standing Bear nodded gravely. "We will consider these proposals with the respect they deserve." As the formal negotiations began, Kestrel drew Cordelia aside to a quiet spot overlooking the valley below. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting everything in golden light that made the moment feel touched by magic. "Tomorrow marks one full moon since you arrived," he said quietly. "The time I promised you to make your decision." Cordelia had been dreading and anticipating this moment in equal measure. The month had passed like a dream, filled with discovery and growth and the gradual recognition of feelings she had never expected to experience. "I've learned so much," she began carefully. "About your people, about myself, about possibilities I never imagined existed, and your choice." His voice held steady calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands remained carefully still. Instead of answering directly, Cordelia reached for the small bundle she had been carrying. Inside were samples of her needlework, not the formal stitching she had done for white society, but new patterns that combined her grandmother's techniques with Apache designs she had learned from the women. "Ayanna helped me understand something," she said, holding up a particularly intricate piece. "In Apache culture, when a woman weaves the patterns of her adopted people into her work, it means she has chosen to weave her life among them as well." Kestrel's breath caught as he recognized the significance of the gesture. The beadwork incorporated symbols of protection, fertility, and eternal bonding, a visual declaration of intent that spoke louder than words ever could. "Cordelia, ... double quotes," he whispered, her name carrying reverence and wonder. "The spirits that showed you visions," she continued. Stepping closer to him, "they showed me dreams too. Dreams of a life where I could use all my gifts, where I could be completely myself, where love wasn't limited by the blindness of others. And your dreams, ... do they include me?" For answer, she reached up and touched his face with gentle fingers, marveling at the way his eyes closed at her touch. the way he leaned into her palm like a man finding water after crossing a desert. The wedding ceremony took place at dawn. When the Apache believe the veil between worlds is thinnest and blessings flow most freely. Cordelia wore a dress she had sewn herself, white deerskin decorated with beadwork that told the story of her journey from rejection to acceptance, from loneliness to love. The ceremony itself was unlike anything from her former world. Instead of a church, they stood in a sacred grove where generations of Apache couples had made their vows. Instead of a preacher, Chief Standing Bear and Ayana guided them through rituals that honored both their union and their commitment to the greater community. Dr. Fleming stood witness alongside Moses and several townspeople who had made the journey from Mesquite Falls. The presence of both Apache and white observers symbolized the bridge. That, Cordelia and Kestrel's marriage represented proof that love could transcend the boundaries that fear and ignorance tried to enforce. Before the Great Spirit and these witnesses, Chief Standing Bear intoned in both Apache and English, "You declare your intention to walk the same path, to share the same lodge, to raise children who will honor both your peoples." Kestrel's vows were spoken in Apache first, then translated for the assembled guests. "I promise to protect your dreams as fiercely as I protect your life, to honor your wisdom as I honor your beauty, to stand beside you in all seasons until the spirits call us home." Cordelia had spent weeks preparing her response, wanting words that would express the transformation she had undergone. "I promise to weave our lives together like the patterns in my beadwork, different threads, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either could be alone. I promise to be your partner in all things, your comfort in sorrow, your companion in joy." As they exchanged the traditional gifts, Kestrel presenting her with a magnificent horse he had trained himself, Cordelia offering him a war shirt decorated with protective symbols she had beaded. Sun crested the mountains and bathed the ceremony in golden light. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days, featuring games, storytelling, and feasting that brought together Apache traditions with contributions from their white friends. Dr. Fleming found himself learning Apache healing songs while teaching surgical techniques. Moses discovered he had a talent for traditional Apache gambling games. The saloon girls from Mesquite Falls scandalized and delighted everyone by learning Apache women's dances. But the greatest joy came from watching Cordelia bloom into her true self. Free from the constraints of a society that had never fully accepted her, she revealed gifts that had been suppressed for years. Her natural healing abilities flourished under Apache training. Her artistic talents exploded into new forms of expression. Most importantly, her capacity for leadership emerged as she began bridging the gap between her new people and the white community. Within a year, the arrangement that had begun as a temporary cultural exchange had evolved into a permanent partnership. Dr. Fleming established a permanent clinic at the edge of Apache territory, serving both communities. Trade relationships flourished as trust replaced suspicion. The peace treaty negotiated after Whitmore's arrest became a model for other territorial agreements. Cordelia found herself in the unique position of serving as both healer and translator, helping to resolve conflicts before they could escalate into violence. Her presence gave both sides confidence that their interests would be fairly represented. And her growing reputation as a wise woman earned respect that transcended racial boundaries. 5 years after that first devastating rejection in the dusty streets of Mesquite Falls, Cordelia stood in her garden watching her 3-year-old son chase butterflies, while her infant daughter slept peacefully in her cradle. The children were beautiful blends of their heritage, with Kestrel's strong features softened by Cordelia's gentle beauty, her intelligence shining in their dark eyes. "Mama," Little Running Wolf called in Apache, then switched to English. "Tell me again about the white man who was too stupid to marry you." Kestrel laughed from where he sat, cleaning his rifle. "Your son has no respect for his mother's former suitors. He should have respect for the wisdom of the spirits," Cordelia replied, settling her daughter more comfortably in her arms. If Silas Whitmore had not been blind to my worth, I never would have been free to find my true home. As evening painted the sky in familiar shades of purple and gold, Cordelia reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. She had traveled west, seeking security in an arranged marriage, only to discover that the greatest security came from being valued for exactly who she was. The Apache warrior who had seen her in visions had been right about everything. She had found healing in unexpected places, discovered gifts she never knew she possessed, and built a love that honored both her heritage and her chosen family. When little running wolf finally tired of chasing butterflies and curled up against her side, Cordelia whispered the same blessing Ayanna had taught her. May you always know your worth. May you always find your home, and may love always see you truly. The words drifted on the evening breeze like a prayer answered, a promise kept, and a future blessed by spirits who had known all along that the greatest treasures often come disguised as the greatest disappointments. In choosing to see beyond the surface, in having the courage to embrace the unknown, Cordelia had found not just love, but a life beyond her wildest dreams.